Hey, so I came across a new stock. This is within the semiconductor industry. This one's called Aehr Test Systems, ticker symbol AEHR. This one, if we scroll down, just to get a brief overview, because again, this one's very new to me, and would assume a lot of other people too. So what they do is they're providing test systems for burning in semiconductor devices, wafer level, singulated die, and packaged parts. That's going across the world. They also have the company's products also comprise FOXCP system, a single wafer compact test and reliability verification solution for logic, memory, and photonic devices. So honestly, that doesn't mean much to me because I'm kind of new to those terms, but that kind of at least gives us an initial impression of what this company does. And so, I just started digging into them. So if anyone has any opinions on this one or news that I might have missed, uh, please share that down below. I'd be very happy to read that. But currently on the screen, we have a 1 year chart. So we can see it's been going up for the past 1 year. Year to date, somewhat flat. It had an initial pop at the very beginning, and then it's kind of been trading sideways, consolidating. Um, so what we're going to do is just they did release their most recently quarter results. I think it's their third quarter because their year end is over in like June. So we'll look into that. Any other little news, which isn't that much, but we'll go into that. And again, just to get a base for this company, and then we'll go into the technical analysis. So if you're interested in that, by all means, well, let's just kind of see how it's going. So number one, their quarterly results. If we go all the way up to the top, so just some of the things on here is their net sales. Where is that? Their net sales for the full year, so the 9 months, and we can actually do the quarter, but let's start with the 9 month scenario here. So net sales were 42.7 million, which is up 40% from last year's 3 months at 30.5 million. Their net income was 8.4 compared to 3.7 in last year. And if we look at this quarter, their quarter three, their net sales were 17.2, which was up 13% from last year, and net income of 4.1, which was up 84% compared to last year. If we scroll down a little bit, I'll try to do this slowly just so I just want to make sure I hit everything I uh, touched on whenever I was reading this on my own. So some of the pieces, so we finished the quarter with record bookings for a single quarter of 33.3 million and a strong backlog of an additional 31.6 million. Their effective backlog, which includes all orders received since the end of the third quarter, is 41 million. So a lot of sales in the backlog that they already know that they're going to achieve. They just have to now follow through with it. Total bookings for the fiscal year date, including 9 million just received in March, is now up to 72.5 million. They go on to say their momentum is mainly in the silicon carbide wafer level burn in. So this kind of explains what this FOX. It looks like there's a couple, but they have this FOX NPTM, XPTM. Again, not familiar with that, but if you are, you can kind of help me out with that. Uh, I'd be very interested in knowing kind of what these are, but the main thing is they're getting into the silicon carbide semiconductors. If we scroll down a little bit more, in addition, our lead silicon carbide customer continued our so their main customer continued to ramp up their production and their use of this FOX XP production. During the quarter, we received $25 million a $25 million order for a significant number of that FOX XP wafer level test to ship over the next 6 to 7 months to meet their increased capacity. So that's very good. They don't mention who it is, but whoever this main customer is, Um, I would like to see on their financials at some point some sort of customer breakdown, because it does seem like they have, um, what's the right word, customer concentration in a very small number of customers. I think because this business is so early, I'm not concerned with that. But of course, it is concerning because if this one major customer who's contributing $25 million to this company that's very small, because if we go back to the market cap, which even what my impressions would be is this is very overvalued at a 57 price to earnings ratio. Even with that overvaluation, this company is still in the millions. It hasn't even cracked $1 billion in market cap, so very small. And so just continuing along that line, if they lose a big revenue contributor, that's going to be very hurtful to a company like this. But again, it's too early. I don't think that's a concern, but it is something to that we'll keep in track. We'll keep track of. Next thing, we also make great progress. We also had a very productive quarter. Uh, it mentions how they're kind of diversifying. We're also now engaged in several gallium nitride semiconductor suppliers, ranging from radio frequency to power devices. So I'm imagining that means they're trying to get into like uh, cell phone type semiconductors, uh, because I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but I know I will at some point. That it even says it right here that this what they're helping supply is with the electric vehicles, the fast growing demand for silicon carbide devices and electric vehicles, along with like um, the charge points for these electric vehicles. So it's all kind of revolving around that. Um, the only other thing here before we actually look at the financials is the fact that this company made a decent amount of money from their uh, stock offer. I'm not sure what their initial stock offering was, but they added up to $25 million in common stock. Most recently, receiving 7.3 million in sales of 208,000 shares with the average price of 34.78. So again, we'll get into the technicals to see how that kind of is affecting this stock, but just something to be aware of. And then if we go all the way down to the actual financial statements, and I'll make this a little bit bigger for us. I don't know if that really did much, but so we can see right here the 3 months ended comparison on the left side right here, and then the 9 month side over here. So clearly revenue is growing, net sales compared on a quarterly basis between this quarter and the same quarter last year is going up close to 20-ish percent, 20 to 30%. And on the 9 month, it's almost up 50%. And what I like about this company is even with all that revenue growth, especially over the 9 months, and yeah, I would say more so on the 9 months where you can see it really extrapolated, that they grew $12 million in sales, but the cost of sales only went up about four. So this is a very good uh, gross profit margin where they're making about uh, 50% gross profit this year, where last year they were making about, what would that be, 13 divided by 30? Um, quick math here. 13 divided by 30, about 43%. So that is a nice uptick to reach that 50%. That's always a nice indicator, especially for a technology stock. Another thing is, even with all this growth, I guess selling and administrative did go up fairly decent. Research and development, that ticked up. But again, it's still very much in moderation. Income, still a large percentage is flowing down to that. Even on a quarterly basis, you can see it's relatively it's relatively flat, I would say. It looks like they are investing a decent, or at least putting more into their selling, general, and administrative expenses. So, but for the most part, I do think it looks like they're keeping it intact. You know, it's not blowing up as we've seen with other companies. It seems to be gradually increasing along with sales, so nothing alarming at this point. Um, if we scroll down to their balance sheet, one thing that I do like about this company is at least last year they pretty much just had cash, but now, I mean, they still have tons of cash, like $17 million around, but they're now shifting it into these short term investments, which I think is just like bonds with the US government. And what I like about that is instead of it just being cash just sitting there, not doing anything, they're now putting a sizable portion of that into something that'll gain interest for them over time, especially when they don't need it. Because if we look at their current liabilities, it's just wildly lower. All their current liabilities is, we'll just say 9.3 million. They have almost double that in just cash. And if we look at current assets, it's like 7 times larger. This company is very stacked in terms of just resources that they can use. So very solid company. Uh, and that pretty much wraps up their financials. I will touch on this one, kind of just goes into not much here. This is really just the third quarter. It mentions how the backlog was 31, which I also mentioned. So uh, really just a duplication. This article kind of touches on how they were thinking the growth is expected to slow in the current quarter with an adjusted profit of 14% and revenue of 11%, which still very good, but I guess on a more recent basis, you know, we would expect it to be in the 20s. So it's pulled back, but considering the semiconductor market with the oversupply of inventory, uh, you know, there's some factors in here that I'm not too concerned that it would slow down, at least at this point and maybe even next quarter. But after that, when things kind of stabilize, I think we'll see growth in this one. Again, still very new to this company and getting foundation. So we'll continue to monitor this one over time. Um, it also says the current fiscal year ending in May, annual earnings are expected to jump 43% with growth accelerating in fiscal 2024, up 83%. So this one's a big grower, and that's kind of what caught my attention on this one. Um, the last piece was it goes into this earnings call, and I I did read this in advance, and I marked a couple things. I'll just try to highlight them as we go without taking too much time here. The first point, very similar to what we saw earlier. Total bookings for the physical year is already at 72.5. That they're increasing momentum we are seeing in wafer level test and burn in for silicon carbide. Companies are adding significant capacity in silicon carbide semiconductors to, to address the incredible forecasted demand, particularly in those electric vehicles and electrical vehicle charger markets. So that seems to be their big target right now, and that market should continue to grow. And if they're one of the early uh, inventors or adopters to this type of technology, this is going to be a very strong stock, at least in the near term. And when I say near term, I'm talking like 5 years. So I suppose the correct term is actually long term. They're going to be a good company long term. Um, the other thing, and this was probably my my favorite line of this whole thing. So a forecast from this William Blair, no idea who that is, but so I'm hoping that's an external person, but it might be an internal person. Either way, if if his estimate is even close to reality, I'm really happy I came across this one because he's saying that the silicon carbide market for devices in electric vehicles alone, such as traction inverters and onboard chargers, all this stuff for EVs in 2021 to more than 41.1 million 6-inch equivalent wafers in 2030 represents a a compound annual growth rate of 48.4%. So between now and 2030, they're saying the market that they're in is projected to compoundly grow nearly 50%. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So we will keep tabs on this one, see how it actually evolves over time. It goes on to say how we also had several potential new customers. Where's that? We had several new customers come in to see the automated wafer aligners in operation. Our lead silicon carbide customer continued to ramp up its production. We mentioned that earlier. This is also a good sign if I can find it. It talks about their patents. I might have skipped this one. Here it is. We maintain our patents across the world, including major semiconductor and automotive supplier hubs such as the United States, Germany, Italy, Korea, Japan, Singapore, and even China. So they have a lock on some sort of patent here. I don't know if it's all those FOX products or maybe just one or two. Either way, this is giving me a good sign. We'll see how it builds over time. It goes on to touch some of the semiconductors that we know. So multiple market leaders, including Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, and others, have publicly discussed their investments to integrate silicon photonic transceivers into their microprocessors, graphic processors, and chipsets. If that comes, that's a whole new wave of customers for this client or this company that could be very lucrative for them. Again, it seems like it's too early. It sounds like these companies are still in discussion of if it's even worthwhile. If it actually does come to fruition and they do invest, that could mean very big things for this company. Yeah. So one thing that I would like to find is who its competitors are, who's selling the same type of products. Hopefully, it's a very small pool, and if it is, yeah, this one has a lot of room to run. It also immediately follows up by saying, we believe this transition is still several years out. So again, we're hoping we found one that we're able to catch on the very early terms, because again, very small company, less than $1 billion. So if this one's market cap can grow to even just say $5 billion, which is still a very small company, I mean, that's going to be a lot of money on the table that I'm hoping we found a winner here. The next piece, Aehr currently has systems installed at over half a dozen customers for 100% testing, and its burn-in silicon photonics devices used in 5G infrastructure. That's one of my buzzwords, the 5G, data and telecommunication transceivers. So again, I'm imagining that means in smartphones, given the 5G and the telecommunication. So that's a big market. I know that it has a lot of value there. And then the last piece is we have shared for revenue at least 60 million to 70 million for our current fiscal year that ends May 31st, which represents a growth of at least 18 to 30% year over year and revenue growth of 35 and 75% in the second half of the fiscal year compared to the first half of the year. So lots of growth here. I've always had like a magic number of 25. If I can see a company growing 25% in revenue or profits, that is a big time winner. This one seems to be hitting those marks. So I am pretty excited about this one. Because it's so small, I don't think there's going to be much news on this one, like as we continue to follow it. But whenever there is, hopefully we'll be one of the first to catch it, and we can, buy or proceed as needed. So now into the technicals for this one. So we set this one up in advance. Again, this is the first time I'm looking at it, but we set it up just like we've done with others with our what appears to be the low for this one, like all-time type lows. It's obviously not, because if we scroll back, for a long time it was trading between about like $1 and $3, and then all of a sudden it had a pop when most of the semiconductors really kind of showed out, and then it recorrected, and now it's trending back up. So if we, oh, and so I drew in what appears to be the max at about $38. We have this resistance point, like a preliminary resistance point of about 35. Fair value seems to be about 24 based on the fact that it had some resistance here in the past during 2021. It also seemed to stall out there more recently in December of 22. And then we have this buy point where it seems like um, really I feel like that buy point's kind of high because really it should be maybe down here, but I pushed it up a little bit just because the strong uptrend it's currently on. I don't know if we'll ever fall back to this unless some crazy bad news happens to this one. So I just try to keep it at least moderately there in terms of a buy point. There seemed to be some support here, most recently in like September of 22. It acted as resistance back in February of 22. But I would say the main thing that we're looking at is the purple lines, that uptrend channel that we have. And fortunately for us, we're seeing that it's actually dipped below the uptrend. Again, I'm not too concerned by that. For one, because I just don't have that much information on this one. But based on what I saw, this one seems like it's a good grower. Lots of good news coming up. I do think it might be overvalued because, again, that PE ratio was close to 60 when the market average is 20. But then again, is the market average growing at 30 to 40%? They're not. So that's why this one might be a good time to buy. For me at this point, the buy points that I marked out are 13, which is the green line, and I just said 24. It's currently at 26, and we can zoom in a little bit. But the reasons why I'm currently considering buying this one, and again, very modestly, maybe just a couple shares just to kind of dip my toes in the water, is because number one, it's close to what I would say the fair value point. This uptrend gives me reason enough to suspect that it's most likely not going to pull back this far, back to 13 anytime soon. I think we might see it pull back to 24, like somewhere in the $24 range. But even that might be a stretch because, again, they're putting out good numbers. So nothing is preventing them from just continuing to go higher. So, but that said, I do have that $24 price point in there as a buy point. I think it's close enough to that mark. Plus, we're at the bottom side of the uptrend channel. I think that's a good indicator for us in terms of like a buy point. So, I think how I'm going to treat this is to buy, again, just maybe $100, just get a couple shares, and then we'll see how it plays out next week. If it continues to drop, okay, I might add in another couple shares. I don't know what a full position in this one will look like for me. I just kind of buy and go with the flow of what I think is good prices given a certain time. So chances are just anytime I circle back to this and I see it's at a good price for me, I might just add one or two shares, and over time it'll just build out to something large, preferably. Um, but that's pretty much my reason for this. If you know anything more that I maybe didn't touch on here that you'd like to share, let me know. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer it because, again, this one's new, but I did read a fair amount about this one, so I can try my best to help on this. But yeah, I guess going back to if I were to buy this one and it continues to pull back, yeah, I'd probably just add another share or two and build it up. But I think based on how this one has been playing out, especially since when about July of 22, I don't see a reason why it would break its uptrend at this point. I think it'll just keep climbing. Um, I think the financials were released. I don't know if it has a date at the bottom or maybe the top. March 30th. So March 30th, that actually was here. So apparently they didn't like the results. I'm not really sure why. I guess because it didn't grow at the clip that they thought. Because it grew at between like 14 and 11%, where they thought it would grow at maybe like 20, 25. So maybe that does check out. It might have been really overvalued at that point. So yeah, we'll just continue to watch this. I do want to add at least a little bit just to say I have it in case it does continue to keep rising. But again, that's just me. So just a quick summary of this one. So AEHR, currently it's at 26. I have buy points marked at 13 and 24, and a resistance point at 35. So that's decent growth between where it currently is. I mean, that's about a 33% return if it can hit that point. And then we just put in the date of that's when we checked on it. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.